Picture this. In just 48 hours, $6.4 trillion evaporated from the U.S. stock market. That's not just a blip. It's a full-scale financial meltdown triggered by Trump's aggressive global tariff policies. Investors went into full panic mode, and the markets followed suit like dominoes, crashing one after the other. This wasn't just volatility. It was a warning shot, one that echoed through Wall Street and left everyone wondering what just happened. But here's the kicker. This was just the opening act. When you tamper with a global supply chain using blunt force trade war tactics, the entire system shudders. The stock market didn't stumble, it crumbled. And the ones who paid for it? Everyday people, blindsided and unprepared. If you're the kind of person who doesn't want to be caught off guard when the next economic storm hits, hit that like button and subscribe. The truth gets deeper, and you're about to discover why. The auto industry didn't just take a hit, it got steamrolled. When Trump slapped 15 to 20% tariffs on steel and aluminum, it sent shockwaves through manufacturers. Companies like GM were forced to slow production, slash jobs, and hit the brakes on future plans. It wasn't about tweaking the economy. It was about rewriting the rules mid-race. Suddenly, making cars in America became a lot more expensive, and buyers? They were left staring at price tags that looked like down payments on houses. Think about it. A 10% price hike on a vehicle isn't pocket change. It's a paycheck, maybe two. Consumers were blindsided. Automakers scrambled. And all this chaos? It came from one economic policy decision. That's the power of tariffs when used recklessly in a trade war. But here's the real twist. This wasn't the only industry left bruised. Want to know who else got slammed? You're about to find out. Farmers, who once thrived as America's food backbone, found themselves caught in a crossfire. When countries like China hit back with retaliation, U.S. soybean exports dropped by 15%, cotton by 10%, and wheat by 8%. Years of trusted trade routes collapsed overnight. American farms were built on stable exports, not tariff-fueled standoffs. And now, crops had nowhere to go but storage units and headlines. What's wild is that these global supply chain disruptions didn't just hurt numbers on a spreadsheet. They ruined livelihoods. All in the name of protecting domestic markets, America lost foreign ones. A trade war might sound tough on paper, but in practice, it's a mess that buries farmers in debt and uncertainty. And what happens when food becomes scarce or too expensive? Keep watching. Things are about to get personal. Ever walked into a grocery store and walked out wondering if you accidentally paid your rent instead? That's inflation in real time. Trump's tariff strategy pushed food prices up by 6% and gas by a whopping 15%. Suddenly, basic needs became luxuries. And worst of all, wages didn't follow. So people adjusted. Less meat, fewer car rides, more stress. Inflation isn't just numbers. It's pressure on every single choice you make. Tariffs were supposed to defend the U.S. economy, but all they did was pass the cost to the public. From cereal to commute, Americans started budgeting life itself. And it didn't stop there, because when everyday people are squeezed, they start pushing back hard. And that brings us to the streets. What began as quiet frustration turned into a wave of noise. Across New York, Chicago, L.A., and beyond, Americans poured into the streets, furious over rising prices, shrinking jobs, and a failing economic policy. Inspired by Canada's bold boycott tactics, signs went up, voices got louder, and U.S. goods were openly rejected. This wasn't just a protest, it was a movement. And movements don't happen unless something hits home. People were watching the stock market crash, struggling with inflation, and learning how deeply flawed the tariff logic really was. The trade war wasn't just global, it was personal. It united farmers, workers, and small business owners under one banner. We've had enough. And somewhere in all that noise, a familiar face started changing his tune. Jim Cramer, the loud, confident financial voice many trusted, pulled back the curtain. Once a supporter of the tariff strategy, he publicly admitted he got it wrong. The data was brutal, and he couldn't deny it anymore. He called the entire economic policy a failure, highlighting its flawed math and devastating impact. A rare moment of honesty in a world full of spin. His change of heart wasn't just personal. It was symbolic. If someone that close to the financial pulse could admit Trump's strategy failed, what does that say about the rest of us? Cramer's regret painted a clear picture. The trade war wasn't delivering protection. It was delivering damage. But why was the foundation of the entire policy so shaky? Well, buckle up. Behind all the chaos was a formula so simple it could fit on napkin. Trump's administration used trade deficit divided by imports to determine tariff rates. No nuance, no real-world calibration. It was economic policy made in a vacuum, disconnected from global supply chain realities. Experts couldn't believe their eyes. This wasn't strategy, it was guesswork. Imagine running a multi-trillion-dollar economy based on grade school math. Countries with trade surpluses got slammed with high tariffs. Actual high-tariff offenders got a pass. It was like spinning a wheel and hoping for fairness. But if the foundation is broken, the house collapses. And collapse it did, just not only in the U.S. When America throws a rock, the world feels the splash. Vietnam, Cambodia, and even allies were slapped with arbitrary tariffs. Meanwhile, countries that actually had protectionist practices flew under the radar. This unbalanced trade war fractured global supply chains and ignited widespread retaliation. No one was left untouched. International suppliers scrambled, costs skyrocketed, and production efficiency nosedived. Investors backed off. Uncertainty took over. The global economy thrives on trust, and this chaos burned bridges that took decades to build. And you know who got hit back hardest? America's closest trading partner. Let's talk about Canada. Canada didn't yell, it acted. With precision, it launched 25% tariffs on U.S. cars that violated trade agreements and slapped duties on $30 billion worth of goods. It wasn't about rage. It was about respect. They refused to let misguided American economic policy bully them into submission. And their citizens? They responded with one voice. From supermarkets banning U.S. products to public boycotts and even booing the national anthem at events, Canadians made their stance crystal clear. Retaliation wasn't just political, it was cultural. It wasn't just about tariffs. It was about values. And when one country fights back, others take notes. This wasn't one punch, it was a chain reaction. Trump's tariffs led to worldwide retaliation, plunging the U.S. deeper into isolation. Friends turned cold, allies turned strategic, and American workers felt the fallout. From job losses to shrinking exports, the costs mounted, but the administration stood firm. The trade war had officially spiraled. And in the end, the ones who suffered weren't negotiators in suits. They were families, businesses, and consumers just trying to keep up. Economic policy shouldn't feel like a gamble, yet that's exactly what it became. The question now isn't who won. It's what do we all lose? They said it was bold. They called it strategic. But in reality, it was economic suicide, and it cost the U.S. $6.4 trillion in just 48 hours. Let that sink in. While the world was distracted, Trump triggered a financial landslide so brutal it made Wall Street panic like never before. And the weapon? Tariffs. Simple, brutal, and completely misunderstood. This wasn't a fluke. It was the result of a reckless economic policy built on fantasy math and zero foresight. Inflation exploded, global allies turned their backs, and the U.S. found itself isolated in a trade war it couldn't control. Want to know how one man crashed the market and made America more expensive for everyone? Watch closely, because what you're about to discover changes everything.